Hi, and welcome to my front-end testing on steroids talk. I'm going to share with you some Cypress features that gives you a productivity boost other than all the confidence of a testing tool like Cypress. So I'm Stefano Magni, I'm an Italian front-end engineer. I currently work for Workwave and I work remotely on a big code base entirely written with React and TypeScript. I'm the author of some plugins for Cypress. The most important one is Cypress Wait Until that gets almost 300,000 downloads a month. And you can find all my recent contributions on GitHub. And all the examples that I'm going to show you are available publicly at this repository. I'm going to share both the link to the slides and the link to the repository with the organizers so they can share with all of you. And this presentation is almost 100% code, so I jump directly to VS Code and a super simple front-end application that I prepared for this talk. I prepared this React login form that you can find it in the repository along with a working backend that allows you to wipe data, create a new user, and use the backend as um, has a real backend that allows you to log in with the username you have just created. So first of all, what is Cypress? Cypress is a browser automation tool. It allows you to control a browser and to perform the user actions inside the same browser. And it has some unique features because as every browser automation tool, it can be run inside the CI without the interface, obviously, but it has even a UI. And this is the main UI of Cypress where you find all the tests all of the project. And here you can find the tests that I prepared for the talk. But if you are interested in deepening the topic, please check out the first two tests that have a lot of comments for every single step. So when I click on one of the tests, an Electron browser is launched. See, if you don't know Electron is just a super simple version of Chrome. So this is Chrome. This is a controlled Chrome because Cypress loads the browser and loads your front-end application in an iframe and allows you to control what's happening in the front-end application and what's happening in the test with this test runner that it's what makes Cypress really unique and really outstanding compared to their competitors. So I want to show you this super simple test, and in order to allow you to understand how a testing tool could improve your productivity. So this is just a super simple end-to-end test, okay? An end-to-end test is a test where you load your front-end application. The front-end application communicates with your real backend, and so you can check that everything works for the end user. And sorry, this is the right test, the end-to-end one. And in this case, I'm just going to call the backend in order to wipe the database so I can launch my test without dirty data. And I'm going to create in the backend a new user. This user, these credentials, I'm going to use these credentials in order to fill the form, and then clicking the login button, I'm going to visit my application, fill in the form, clicking the button, and I then want to check that the welcome back string will be visible, okay? And so this is a super simple end-to-end test, and you can see it running in Cypress, okay? At the moment, we are creating the user, then we have filled the form, we click on the button, and then we wait for the final string to be visible, okay? What's wrong with this test? So there's nothing wrong for the test itself, but remember that I'm going to talk you about both testing confidence and both productivity improvements. So the real disadvantage of this test is that it's slow. It's really slow because it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds for to be completed. And the problem is obviously that the front-end application is communicating with the real backend, and so we must wait for the backend, to do its job. And this is the main problem because this test is perfect to check both the front-end application and both the backend application. But if you, like me, are a front-end developer, when you're writing the code of your front-end application, you don't bother about the backend application. You just want that the front-end application works. And a lot of times you are going to write in the code for the username input field, so you are going to check that everything works in the browser. You are going to check that you are going to write the code for the password input field, and you are going to check in the browser. Even the same for the button, the same for the function that performs the Ajax call. And you you can't count on a so slow test because this is just one test, but probably for your application and in your scenario you are going to write 10, 20, 30 or 40 tests, so you can't wait 4 minutes to get a feedback. This is a perfect test, but you can't use as a development tool. And the real advantage of a Cypress is that I want to introduce you the concept of UI integration test. A UI integration test is a test where the front-end application performs the usual Ajax call, but these calls don't hit the real backend, but Cypress, that controls the browser where the front-end application is running inside, simply responds with a static fixtures. So in this case, this is the same test, okay? But obviously, since I don't have to deal with a real backend, I just have to visit the homepage, and I ask Cypress to intercept every AJAX request. And then I'm going to ask Cypress to intercept every post call to the URL that ends with /API/authentication, and to respond with a static fixtures. A static fixture is a static response. Okay, so imagine that if I start working on the login form, I just ask to my backenders to give me the response that they are going to give me in case of if the credentials are right. And this is the fixture. Okay, this is obviously a fake fixture, but in this case, the front-end application doesn't check what's inside the token. So I just need to know that the response is a JSON with a token string. And in this case, for the front-end application, everything is working as usual. So the front-end application performs the AJAX call, and then Cypress responds. So this is almost immediately. And obviously, I'm going to check to assert about the same visibility of the string. And let's check out how this test performs. Okay, sorry. Okay, this is the same test. We can even comment out the next test that I want to show you. So this is the same test, and it lasts just more or less 1 second. Okay, so from 5, 6, and 7 seconds to just 1 second. Obviously, this test is not an end-to-end test. I'm not checking that both the front-end application and the back-end application work. I just want to check my front-end application because, again, I'm a front-end developer, so I write the code on my front-end application, and I want to be sure that my front-end application works. Then, when I'm okay with my application, I'm going to check that everything works with the backend too. And working without a backend allows me even to start the front end working on a front end application before the backend is ready. Okay, so we can work in parallel, and this is pretty amazing because okay, this is just a test. We are checking that with the right credentials, the front-end application performs correctly. And if a test like this takes just 1 second, I can think about using these tests a lot of times because again, when I started using when I became expert with Cypress, I started using it as a development tool. So instead of usually you write the code of an application, you check manually in the browser that everything works, then you change the code and you check manually and change the code and you check manually. And then when the front-end application when the front-end flow or the login form in this case works, you're going to write the test. And in the test, you repeat the same actions that you perform manually a lot of times. So you have to invert these last two steps. So you write the code and then you add an interaction in a Cypress test, and then you check that everything works in Cypress. Then you change the code and you check that everything works in Cypress. Okay, again and again. And Cypress allows you to stop performing manual action. And remember that Cypress is even a lot faster compared with Vue. So this is the real productivity performance boost. And consider even that in this test, I'm going to fill the input fields like the user would do. So as you can see, filling the form is pretty slow, fast compared with me, faster than me, but pretty slow. And I can show you even another test when instead of filling the form like the user, I'm going to set the value of the input fields directly. So in this case, as you can see, the test is super fast. So imagine that, and please check that every time that I save the test, and even if I save the front-end application and the front-end application has been compiled, the test is refreshed. So this is really important because I can work on my code on one screen and keeping Cypress on another screen, and being sure that everything works perfectly and that the test works. And this is really important because allows you to have feedback the fastest way when you need, when you're writing the code, and that's perfect. Think about that. This is my talk is just about using Cypress instead of performing a lot of manual actions. Okay, but obviously this test we can discuss if the test where I set directly the value is a valid test, but consider that probably, for example, if we are testing, if we are working on a project like Medium and we are testing that the form creation works, probably we are going to check that filling the title works, filling the subtitle works, and probably the whole text. Sometimes I can even set directly the value instead of writing manually, letting Cypress writing letter by letter all the text. But again, I don't want to talk to you about test quality, but I want to talk to you about productivity. And sometimes when you write the code of your login form, obviously you have even to test some edge cases. For example, what happens if I need to test how the front-end application works when the backend responds with wrong credentials response. But in this case, I can this is the case. So I'm asking Cypress to respond to the same Ajax call, but with a 401 status in this case. So I know that 401 status is for happens when the credentials are wrong. And in this case, I'm just checking that the correct string becomes visible. Okay, so why this is important? Well, because a lot of times when you write the code of your front-end application, obviously you must check that everything works for the happy path, but you write the code even for a lot of non-happy paths. And in order to test them without the backend, because sometimes it's really hard to simulate some wrong response from the backends. And in this case, probably when you have to check something like that, you are going to change the code of your front-end application, and probably you are going to add some fake returns from the functions that are going to perform the Ajax calls. And even to save time filling the form, you are probably going to add some default values to the input fields. So you're going to add a lot of conditions and strange conditions in your code base in order to test some edge cases. But obviously, these changes are fragile. You could even forget them in the code base, or they could go get your code base dirty because you're going to have a lot of fake functions and fake code like this. So if I use Cypress for the same thing, I'm going to don't change the front-end code base, but I'm going to ask Cypress that control the browser to perform some action for me. So their front-end code base is perfect. I don't touch it, and I'm going to ask Cypress to control what happens inside the browser. And Another productivity boost comes from checking from delays. So in this case, you can I coded the front application, the login form, in order to show a be patient string when the login AJAX request takes too long, in order to mitigate a bad experience for the user. So check 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 the test. The test obviously almost is the test is almost the same because the test ends when the string is visible, but obviously is going to last the previous 1 second plus the delay in between the be patient string is shown. So in this case, I showed the be patient string right after 1 second. So the test obviously is going to last more or less 2 seconds, the 1 second of the previous test and 1 second for the delay. But again, Cypress allows me to control the browser. So in this case, I can even control the browser clock, and just after clicking on the login button, I tick the clock by 1 second. So in this case, if I save the test, you can see that here I have more forward the browser clock. In this case, the test again returned to last more or less 1 second. And this is another productivity boost because even when I have some animations, or even if I have to wait some delays in the front-end application, I can control the browser clock and have super fast tests. And this is really important because otherwise I have to perform some strange checks and some strange changes directly in the code base in order to don't face the delays every time that I have to check manually that everything works in this login form. And so I have shown you how to use Cypress to perform your manual actions and using it as a development tool instead of a testing tool. And please remember that if you uh, remember the coding, manual testing, and automation testing steps, but if you invert the last two steps, you are going to write the code and leveraging Cypress, and when you are finished, and when you have finished with the features you are working on, you have already written the test. So you don't have another step of writing the test that a lot of times is pretty slow, but you just have to check that even manually everything works perfectly. But if you want to use Cypress as a development tool, there is another giant topic that's debugging. Well, I don't know if you have experience with Puppeteer or Selenium, that are the most famous browser automation tool. I have experience with them, and I can guarantee you that debugging them is pretty hard, is a nightmare. I have to be honest, it's a nightmare because a lot of times you don't have a direct connection with the browser, and you don't have you're going to have the you can leverage browser DevTools inside the browser, but you have to debug the test outside of the browser. And so a lot of times you are not sure because something is not working. You are not sure if the front end is not working, front end application is not working, if the browser automation tool is not working, or if you are not able to use the browser automation tool the best way. And so debugging them is a nightmare, and everyone hates Selenium and Puppeteer for that. But Cypress allows you to debug applications the easiest way. First of all, because since Cypress works inside the browser and not outside of the browser, you can use the same developer tools. So you can open the console and using the same browser DevTools. So in this case, as you can see here, I'm completely logging the front-end application state every time that you change the input fields. And this is the centralized console for both the front-end application and the test, because if I'm going to add a console log, console.log cet.jsconf, okay, you are going to okay, here the logging. So both the front-end application and the test use the same console, and this is amazing because it's really easy to understand uh, when and what is not working. And sometimes, for example, with in the test runner, if you don't have enough space in the test runner to have a useful feedback, you can click on the step, and Cypress is going to console everything that's related to this session. Another really interesting tool. And obviously I can inspect the HTML of my login form. And I don't know if you have already noticed, but thanks to the test runner, I have even time traveling for my test. So if I stop, or for example, on this step, as you can see on the right, Cypress is showing me that before filling the password input field, the front application looked like that, and after filling the input field looked like that. I can even pin it, okay, and stop trying to understand how it looks after and before this step, and it's really useful because when something goes wrong, I can even manually check what went wrong, because obviously um, when you use a browser automation tool, the browser automation tool is really fast, so a lot of times you can't understand what's happening because the pace is too fast. But in this case, you can go back and understand what's happening. And in this case, for example, you can obviously, if I open the browser tools, I can inspect HTML at this particular step. For example, you can see that there is no strings for the final feedback, but if I go here and I inspect the loading string, I can see that now there is loading string in the HTML. So I'm inspecting the exact application here. And there is one more step, one more important thing about debugging. That's framework-specific DevTools. Because I'm a React developer, a lot of times, I'm going to leverage both the React and the Redux DevTools. But how obviously when I write a front-end application, when I code a front-end application, I can leverage the framework-specific DevTools inside the browser. But how could I install them in Cypress? It's really easy because Cypress allows you to perform the test into Electron, that's the default choice, but allows you to perform the test inside every browser installed on your machine that it's compatible with Chrome, Edge, the conversion, and Firefox. So in this case, I want to run the test on Canary. Okay, so Canary, I have installed Canary on my local machine, and since Cypress persists a Chrome user, I can install from the extension site both the React and the Redux DevTools. So So just to recap, we have Cypress that performs actions really quick. It allows me to debug my front-end application as I'm used to do, and allows me to rerun the test when I save the application, when I save the source code. And again, Cypress is amazing. You need probably 2 or 3 weeks to understand the semantics and how Cypress works, and then trust me, you're going to use it not just as a testing tool, but even as a development tool. And again, if you want to deepen the topic, please check out these two tests. There are a lot of comments in them, so you can check here that every single step is commented, so you can understand them really the best way. And there are even all the tests for all the cases of the login form together. And more in general, let's return to the slides. There is a lot more to tell about Cypress, but again, in these 40 minutes, I want to concentrate on the most important features that allows you to improve your productivity, not only your testing capabilities, because developers tell me always the same, that they know the importance of the confidence the test gave, but they have no time. Okay, so I want to concentrate in this talk about how to reduce the time needed for tests, just using them as a development tool. And again, please check the full test in order to understand a lot more features about Cypress. And if you're interested, Corey House shared a talk about the same topic about testing and productivity, and he pushed the topic forward by adding another development tool right in the front-end application. And if you want to deepen the topic, please check out his talk. And I like to share feedback a friend of mine gave me, that last year I gave them a course about Cypress and testing, and he told me that his developers had never written a test in their life, but now they are crazy about Cypress. They write a lot of tests and they use Cypress as a development tool, like I'm sharing in this talk. And in the slides, you can find even a lot of links to external resources. There are some of my articles about Cypress and some not mine. And there are even really interesting courses and even some extending sources. The extended sources, I split them from the standard articles because you need hours to read them, but trust me, they deserve the time. And again, I want to show you even that I have almost completed to write my book on GitHub about UI testing best practices, because when I started studying the topic, I realized that there are a lot of contents on the web about UI testing, but you have to mix them and you have to apply a lot of best practices on different tools, etc., etc. So that's why I prepared this book. There are almost 25 articles, long articles about all the UI testing with some real life examples. And thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for that. It was really interesting. I'm a huge fan of Cypress, and that still was really useful and really beneficial. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie.
So I'm sure we have lots of questions. If not, I know I have a few. Okay, we got some questions from the previous conversation, so that means I get a chance to ask mine. So let's go. So can Cypress do multiple browser testing yet?
Yep. Unfortunately, Cypress is limited to Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. But for Edge, I mean only the Chrome version of Edge, so not the all Edge versions. And it's a choice. It's a choice of the team because usually when someone approaches UI testing, obviously tries to test everything on every browser, but then he or she realizes that testing everything on every browser is counterproductive. And usually one of the best practices when you approach this world is to choose just one reference browser, because most of the time when you want to test on there are a lot of scenarios, but 80% of the times when you want to test everything on each browser, is that because you want to be sure that all the CSS details of your application is fine on every browser. But usually because of Webpack and a lot of useful plugins, the JavaScript part of the project works the same on each browser. So if you are approaching this world, the UI testing world, please choose a browser. It could be Chrome, Firefox, or whatever you want, but choose just one browser and leverage an external tool like Percy or Applitools in order to test your CSS on each browser. So you run both locally and on your CI the JavaScript part, the functional part of the test just on a single browser, and all the CSS tests on external tools that has a lot of power in their servers and a lot of optimizations.
That's really great advice to separate it. So you're saying Cypress is more focusing on the functional,
Yep.
and there are other tools that are focused more on the styling. Could you just list off some other example of those other platforms or tools that you just mentioned
Yep,
for the
I could tell
CSS?
you for the assessor, I suggest to use probably Percy and Applitools are the most mature tools, but there are a lot of different platforms, and usually all these platforms have specialized plugins in order to integrate with Cypress. So you can launch your functional test with Cypress, and at a specific point you can launch Percy, Applitools, or Chromatic or other tools in order to get the CSS test at this point. And usually, again, these tools like Applitools and Percy have plugins for Cypress, for Test Cafe, for Selenium, for Puppeteer, and all the tools that you usually use to in order to run your UI tests.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna leave my questions to the side now. We've got some great questions in the Q&A section. So, how effectively splitting test scenario? How we are actually effectively splitting our test scenarios? Like, how can we use a login for multiple tests in more robust and composable way?
Yeah.
I think it's talking more about abstraction.
Yep. I didn't have enough time with the talk, but there is an approach that Cypress calls app actions. That's Cypress suggests you, since Cypress can communicate with your application because both Cypress and your front-end application works in the same browser. Cypress suggests you have a lot of solutions, but the most popular ones are the most Selenium one is to perform AJAX requests directly from your Node.js servers, because remember that you control a browser, you control your application, and you have even a Node.js server to work with. So you can perform AJAX requests directly from Node in order, for example, to log in the user. But the approach that I prefer, it depends on the scenarios, but I prefer this approach. You expose some shortcuts from your front-end application. Just for example, your login React component could expose globally only when it runs inside Cypress. It could expose a login function that's the same function that the login button will call. So from Cypress, you can read this global function and call it directly, pasting the username and the password. So you can leverage your front-end application at all, but without interacting with the input elements, but just
calling directly the login function that performs the JS request and calls the server, and the application is obviously logged in.
Okay, awesome. We've got loads more questions coming in. So let's have a look. Can Cypress do screenshot testing for breaking CSS changes? We have touched on this already, but we'll just spend a short amount of time
but
right
it's
now.
a good question, because a lot of times we need CSS testing. So if you want, I think that there is not a middle area between low level, poor level CSS test and professional CSS. Well, what I mean, if you want just to be sure that more or less your front-end application looks the same, you could leverage some Cypress plugins in order to get the screenshot and compare the screenshot. But usually, there are a lot of subtle changes in the CSS that could be, for example, the curves of the font, or how a specific photo, a specific color is rendered. And sometimes these kind of differences break your test, because usually how the CSS tests are performed by comparing pixel by pixel the screenshot of your image. So if, for example, if you have a text that has a margin top of 10 or 11 pixels, could completely break your test, for example, but it doesn't break your test from a functional point of view. And there are a lot of differences between, for example, retina displays and not retina displays. So if you want to run poor level CSS test, go with some Cypress plugins, but I suggest you, if you want to really be sure about the CSS part of your project, go for professional services, because even remember that if you perform CSS test on your machine, you have to run the screenshot and the screenshot comparison right on your local machine. And the CSS tests are the slowest one. So please use Percy and Applus, because they are super fast. If you want to double check what I'm saying, go with screenshot testing on your machine, and probably you you come back to me telling that I'm right.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We only got a couple of minutes left,
Okay.
so let me try and pick out a couple more questions. Do you work with your QAs at all in maintaining, creating UI tests?
Okay, obviously, what I have talked about in my talk is about UI tests for front-end developers, because QA teams could work a different way. For example, QA teams are usually, it's not for all, but usually they are not so prone to learn something new like a front-end developer is used to. So for them, the transition from Selenium to Cypress could be really hard. But obviously, I know even a lot of QA teams and QA developers that use Cypress, because remember that more or less the Cypress user are 50% front-end developers and 50% QA developers.
Yeah, it's good to have that, to bridge that gap between the different. You don't want silos.
Yeah,
I
but
think
they
makes
run
sense.
different tests, because the front-end developer just want to be sure that everything works, while the QA developer want to be sure that everything, even if unexpected, works. So the front-end developers run checks, not tests, but checks, and the QA developer runs tests and I mean, for tests, I mean exploratory testing. So trying to explore different ways or interacting with the application in order to break it.
You're right. That makes sense. It's different points of view. Yes, developer wants to check it works, and then the tester wants to kind of check it still works when they try and, I suppose, break it and do more boundary conditions. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more question. I don't know how the time's doing. What is the best way to start learning Cypress? And they've added from a React developer, but I think it's probably for any developer.
Yeah, simply start from the documentation and take a look. The documentation is, I think, that is perfect. Is full of examples. There are a lot of recipes on GitHub on the Cypress profile, and you can be sure that everything that Cypress works for you. Even because on the documentation page they share even what are the Cypress currently Cypress limitation, and so you have a complete scenario of Cypress directly from their documentation, and then start for the documentation and go on, because Cypress is really easy. You need probably some days, probably 1 or 2 weeks, in order to fully understand how's the semantics and how it works and how you could change different comments. But then you are okay. Cypress is really easy and improves your productivity a lot.
Awesome. Okay, looks like we have been given a couple more minutes. The talks have started back on YouTube, so people can then choose to go watch the talk or stay here for a couple more questions. So let's have a look. Someone says they've learning unit testing in bootcamp, but they feel lack of confidence in unit testing. What would be the best way for a beginner to learn creating UI tests? I know you've touched on that just now. I don't know if you want to add any more to it from a beginner's point of view, or if it would be the same answer.
There is even a talk of mine on the same topic, because I think that the testing world is amazing. But if you are a newbie and you want to enter the test world and you are a front-end developer, obviously, I think that the best way is to approach the testing world from the end-to-end testing perspective, because you need unit testing in medium and big applications, but not in small applications. You need integration testing probably in all applications, and you need end-to-end testing in all applications at all. So the best way is to start from end-to-end testing, in my opinion, because from a front-end developer perspective, it's end-to-end testing is pretty easy to understand, because you are just automating the interaction with the UI. And even if you are building the new Facebook, or if you are building just a landing page, you need at least one end-to-end test in order to be sure that everything works. And I think that Cypress is the right tool, because when you enter the testing world through the end-to-end testing, you realize that end-to-end tests are not perfect for every kind of test. But again, you have just entered the testing world, and when you realize how much the confidence is from the tests, using tests is like using it. You can't go back at all. So if you, I think that for a newbie and for a front-end developer, is quite hard to enter the testing world with unit tests, because they are quite abstract and they give you little confidence. While if you enter the testing world from the end-to-end testing perspective, you get almost all the confidence with a few tests, and it's quite easy to be understood, because you are just automating the interaction with the UI, what a front-end developer is used to directly in the browser. So please start from the end-to-end testing world, and please take a look at the resources that I have shared in the slides, because there are even a lot of links for newbies, and even an article of mine about the same topic and why I suggest to enter the testing world from the end-to-end testing perspective. So sorry if I spoken so long.
No, I think don't worry, you explained that really well. And I think it's good. And I think it's good to sometimes repeat the important parts for people to realize that. And people shouldn't be scared of end-to-end testing. I think, like you said, it's the better place to start.
I'm not, I'm not against unit testing, but I just want to be sure that you could enter the testing world successfully, because a lot of front-end developers enter the testing world but without success, and so they think that testing is hard, is impossible, is useless. But I think that because entering the testing world from a unit test perspective is hard.
Awesome. Okay, so we got one more has definitely been voted up higher than the rest. Let's have a look. Can Cypress do performance testing?
It depends what do you mean for performance testing. If I
That's all they wrote, so I don't know. I have some answers to this myself, but I'd be interested to know if there's any plugin. I mean, you're right. There's different types of
Yes,
performance
I think
testing.
that
So there's going to
you could
be,
speak
you know,
about, for
the
example,
page load
exactly
time.
tech details like page loading, or tech details like server responses time, or I think that these well, you can, but I call them monitoring tests. What I mean, usually a UI test is performed from the perspective of the user because you want to be sure that the user can use your UI the way you have designed. And the user doesn't care about technical details. Okay, the user want to be sure that the page works, nothing more. And the user doesn't understand if an Ajax call doesn't work. The user just understand if the page works or not at all. And so I think that there are a lot of technical details that must be checked. For example, in the past, on a website of mine, I have checked a lot of details, like, for example, the compression served by the server, or the kind of fonts served by the server, or the weight, or the JavaScript bundles served from the server. But I call them monitoring tests because you are just monitoring technical details. But again, yes, you can. Sometimes the only performance test that I think that Cypress is not good for is performance in terms of frame per second in the page, because since Cypress works on works on your front-end application inside the same browsers. When you run some Cypress commands inside the browsers get slow. And so, for example, in the past, I tried to measure and to test the frame per seconds of a virtual scroll list, but it was quite hard because every Cypress command obviously freezes the browser for tenths of a second. So if you're measuring that your scroll list works at 60 frames per second, just the Cypress commands move the frame per second from 60 to 20 from for a couple of tenths of seconds, but that's what make your test failing. So performance test of the UI inside the browsers, I think it's not Cypress a good tool. I think that in this case, we could use Puppeteer, for example, because Puppeteer works not inside the browser, but works on a Node.js server that communicates directly with the browser, but not inside the browser itself.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay, we're being told to wrap it up. So all the questions have been removed. If Stefano, if you can pick a table and people can go and ask their questions for you at a table. So if you can jump on the table, then I think I was chatting to you on table 1. So I don't know if you go back to table 1 and people can join you there. And thank you so much for an awesome talk, awesome Q&A. I know we could have spoken for another hour. This was brilliant, and I look forward to catching up with you later on.
Thank you, Andy.